Keanu Reeves surprised. 8-year-old burn victim. What happens next will melt your heart. The hospital room smelled faintly of antiseptic and fresh flowers. Little Emma lay in bed, her tiny hands wrapped in soft white bandages, her face showing the fresh scars of a fire that had changed her life overnight. She was only 8, but her eyes had seen more pain than most adults ever would. Nurses moved quietly around her, adjusting machines and checking vitals, but Emma barely noticed. She stared blankly out the window, lost in a world far from the cold, sterile room she was trapped in. Her parents sat nearby, whispering to each other, desperate but helpless. Emma hadn't smiled in weeks. No jokes, no bright laughter, not even a nod when doctors promised she would get better. It was as if the flames had taken more than her skin. They had stolen her spirit too. That's when something unexpected happened. The door creaked open slowly and a man stepped in. Not a doctor, not a nurse. It was Keanu Reeves. Yes, the real Keanu Reeves. Kind, humble, with that soft, familiar smile everyone knew from the movies. Emma's parents gasped quietly, exchanging shocked glances. The nurses froze in place. But Keanu didn't walk in with cameras flashing or a big team following him. No PR stunt, no reporters, just him, carrying a small backpack and a bouquet of wildflowers. He sat down gently on the chair beside Emma's bed and placed the flowers on the table. For a moment, Emma didn't react. She blinked slowly, her weak fingers twitching under the covers. Keanu leaned closer and whispered, "Hey, Emma, I heard you're a real superhero." Emma turned her head slightly, her eyes meeting his. No words came out of her mouth, but for the first time in weeks, a tiny spark lit up in her gaze. Keanu opened the backpack and pulled out a worn hand-stitched teddy bear. It wasn't expensive or fancy, it looked like something stitched by loving hands. "This little guy," Keanu said, "survived all kinds of adventures. He told me he wanted to meet someone strong enough to handle his next journey." Slowly, almost painfully, Emma reached out with her bandaged fingers. Keanu placed the bear carefully into her hands. Tears filled her mother's eyes. Her father covered his mouth with trembling fingers. The room was so silent you could hear the soft hum of the machines. Then, without warning, Emma smiled, a small, fragile smile. But it was real. Keanu didn't rush. He stayed beside her, telling her simple, funny stories about the teddy bear's imaginary travels, climbing mountains, sailing across seas, fighting dragons. Emma listened, her eyes growing wider with every tale. The nurses who had cared for Emma for weeks wiped away their tears silently. Something was changing right before their eyes, but none of us knew yet that this was just the beginning. What Keanu had planned next for Emma would go far beyond a visit. It would touch lives across the world. The next morning, Emma clutched the teddy bear tightly, her eyes now flickering with traces of life. Nurses whispered that she had asked for applesauce, her first words in days. Doctors noticed the difference immediately. Her pulse was stronger, her breathing steadier. But what truly shocked them was the energy she suddenly had to sit up and look around. All this just one day after Keanu's visit. Emma didn't know it, but something deep had awakened inside her. That bear, those stories, and that soft-spoken man had quietly stirred hope where there had been none. Meanwhile, Keanu had not returned to the spotlight. He didn't post about the visit. He didn't tell the world. But he had left a note with Emma's parents. Just a simple message. "Let me know if she wants to go on a real adventure. I have an idea." Her mother read it aloud the next day. Emma's eyes widened. Her voice, though soft and broken, barely above a whisper, formed one word. "Yes." I was there when the hospital called him. Keanu didn't hesitate. Within 24 hours, a plan was in motion. Not for a big show or media attention. This was something personal. He arranged a fully private, medically approved trip. Not to Disneyland, not to some luxury resort, but to a quiet mountain cabin he owned up north. A place filled with trees, birdsong, and peace. But more importantly, it was safe, quiet, and healing. He personally arranged for a medical transport team, nurses who could stay nearby, and even built a makeshift soft play area out of wood and pillows in the cabin's backyard so Emma could move and laugh without fear of falling. I was asked to come along too to document it for Emma's future, to show her later what courage looked like when she forgot it again someday. The morning we left, Emma wore a small sun hat to protect her scars, her teddy bear buckled safely beside her. As the van rolled out of the hospital gates, every staff member stood outside waving goodbye, some crying openly. When we arrived, Keanu was already at the cabin, chopping firewood with ease. As soon as he saw Emma, he dropped the axe, wiped sweat from his brow, and walked over with a grin. "Hey, traveler," he said. "Ready to start your adventure?" Emma nodded, holding out the bear. He said, "We should climb a mountain." Keanu laughed. "Then we better start practicing." The days that followed were nothing short of magic. They weren't filled with grand events or expensive toys, just moments, real ones. Emma feeding baby goats, Keanu teaching her how to throw pebbles into the lake, quiet evenings with stories by the fire. Each small thing chipped away at the pain inside her. But the true twist came on the 5th day when Emma pointed at the hill behind the cabin and said, "I want to go there." What happened next, none of us were prepared for. Not the nurses, not me. Not even Keanu. The hill behind the cabin wasn't massive, but for a fragile 8-year-old recovering from severe burns, it was Everest. Sloped with patches of moss and shaded by tall pines, it stood like a quiet challenge, beautiful, but intimidating. When Emma pointed to it with her small, trembling hand and said, "I want to go there," everyone paused. Her nurse looked concerned. Her parents hesitated. But Keanu didn't blink. He kneeled beside her, meeting her eye to eye. "Then we'll go," he said gently, "but only if we do it your way, your pace." Emma nodded slowly, still hugging her teddy bear. The next morning, the climb began, not with hiking boots or backpacks, but with simple steps. Keanu took Emma's hand while I walked beside them, filming quietly, documenting the impossible journey of a child who was once too weak to sit up. The team had cleared a soft path, and Emma's doctor gave careful limits on how far she could go. Still, each step was a victory. Keanu didn't rush her. When she stopped, he stopped. When she stumbled, he didn't catch her immediately. He let her try first. He believed in her strength more than anyone else ever had. And every time Emma looked unsure, Keanu would smile and whisper, "The bear says you've got this." Halfway up, we stopped under a tall cedar. Emma was sweating, breathing hard, but her eyes were glowing. "I feel like a warrior," she whispered. "That's because you are," Keanu replied. And then he did something unexpected. He pulled out a black bandana from his pocket, tied it gently around Emma's forehead, and said, "Every warrior needs her crown." Emma giggled. It was soft, quiet, but it was real joy. We sat there under that tree for almost an hour, telling stories and drinking water. Emma shared the story of the fire for the first time, not just the facts, but her fear. Her voice cracked and tears rolled down, but she kept talking. And Keanu listened like it was the most important story he'd ever heard. By the time we reached the hilltop, it wasn't dramatic or loud. It was quiet, peaceful. The wind touched Emma's cheeks gently, the sun glowed soft and golden, and she looked out over the forest like a queen who had reclaimed her world. I captured the moment. Keanu standing behind her, hand on her shoulder, Emma holding her bear high above her head, as if declaring victory to the sky. But right when we thought that was the most emotional moment of the day, Emma turned and said, "Can we bring other kids here too?" Her voice was tired, but her heart had grown bigger. That one sentence changed everything. Keanu looked at me, his eyes suddenly wide. "Did you hear that?" he said. I nodded. We both knew this wasn't just about Emma anymore. This was about something far bigger. That evening, after Emma's powerful words echoed through the mountain, Harrington, can we bring other kids here too? The mood shifted. Keanu sat by the fire in silence, staring into the flames, her question repeating in his mind. He wasn't just thinking about her. He was imagining dozens of other children like Emma, scarred, silent, broken by tragedy, and how this place, this quiet cabin in the woods, could become a sanctuary for them too. Emma sat beside him, her head resting on her teddy bear, unaware that she had just planted a seed that would grow into something beautiful. The next morning, Keanu made a few calls, not to the media or his Hollywood friends, but to doctors, child psychologists, burn units. He didn't want headlines. He wanted healing. I saw him sketching something in a notebook, a rough idea of a small retreat center beside the cabin with ramps, soft trails, a therapy garden, and even a small outdoor theater. Emma watched him draw, curious. "Is that for me?" she asked. Keanu smiled. "It's for all the warriors like you." Emma's parents were overwhelmed with emotion. They had come here hoping for their daughter's smile. Now, they were watching her inspire a movement. Keanu wasn't just offering money, he was giving his time, his land, and most importantly, his heart. That day, we all worked together. Emma planted the first flower in what would become the healing garden. She named it Hope. Keanu promised that the spot she had chosen to climb would be named Emma's Hill, and that every child who made it to the top would earn their own warrior crown. As we packed up to return to the hospital for her final week of recovery, Emma turned back to look at the cabin one last time. "Will we come back?" she asked. Keanu kneeled beside her. "Not just come back. You're going to help me run it." And just like that, the little girl who once refused to speak, who had been shattered by fire, had now lit a fire in someone else, a fire that would warm many hearts in the years to come. Back at the hospital, Emma was different. The nurses noticed it first. She laughed more, asked questions, even tried walking short distances on her own. Her burns hadn't vanished, but the pain that once clouded her soul had begun to lift. One morning, while I was helping her color a drawing for Keanu, a nurse walked in with a large envelope. It was addressed to the warrior girl Emma, and the return address read, Children's Burn Center, Texas. Emma's fingers trembled as she opened it. Inside were 4 pages written in big, wobbly handwriting. It was from a 9-year-old named James, who had seen the sketch of Emma and Keanu on a local blog a nurse had posted anonymously. James had survived a house fire too, and had been afraid to speak ever since. But after reading about Emma's Hill, something changed in him. His letter ended with, "If she can climb a mountain, maybe I can get out of bed." Emma's lips trembled. She didn't speak for a long time. Then she looked at me and whispered, "Can I write back?" And she did, carefully, with help, telling James he wasn't alone. From that moment, it was like a dam had broken. Letters started coming from all over, some from children in wheelchairs, others from kids going through chemo, a few from parents who had lost children, just thanking her for reminding them of courage. Keanu read every single one. He visited Emma almost daily now, but didn't bring cameras, didn't tell anyone. He came to sit, to plan, and to quietly build something that no one else could see yet. One evening, as we sat outside her hospital, room under the sky, Keanu looked at me and said, "I'm not building a retreat. I'm building a lighthouse, a place for kids who are lost in the dark." I nodded, but I could see the weight in his eyes. He wasn't doing this because it looked good. He was doing it because it mattered. He told me that as a child, he too had felt lost. His father gone, his life unstable. He never forgot that feeling. "That's why I recognize it in Emma," he said, "and in those letters." A few days later, we got a call from James's family. He had stood for the first time and asked when he could visit Emma's Hill. Keanu smiled softly. "Soon," he said. That night, Emma drew a sign that read, "Welcome, warriors, you are home now." She decorated it with stars, flames, and her teddy bear wearing a crown. Keanu took that sign, laminated it, and promised to hang it at the entrance of the retreat. We didn't know it then, but that simple drawing would go on to become the symbol of something much bigger, something that would change lives across the country. A few weeks later, as construction slowly began at the cabin site, something none of us expected happened. A sleek black car pulled up near the hospital one rainy afternoon, its windows tinted. At first we thought it was just a delivery, but then a tall man stepped out wearing a sharp suit and holding a small leather folder. He introduced himself as Mr. Anderson, a representative from a major corporation, one that specialized in luxury resorts and real estate. He had somehow heard about the project Keanu was building for the kids, and he wasn't here to offer help. He was here to buy the land. "We could turn that cabin in those hills into a 5-star getaway," he said smoothly, showing glossy pictures of what they planned: spas, private villas, golf courses. "It would be good for the town, for business. Name your price." I saw Keanu's jaw tighten as he listened politely, while Emma watched from her wheelchair nearby, clutching her bear. Mr. Anderson wasn't done. He leaned in and added, "You can still keep a little part for your charity. Maybe a small playground on the side. It'll be symbolic." Symbolic. That word hit like an insult. I could see Keanu's hands clench at his sides. Emma didn't understand everything, but she sensed the tension. She whispered, "They want to take it away?" Keanu knelt beside her and said quietly, "Not if we stand strong." He turned to Mr. Anderson and said in the calmest, most cutting voice I'd ever heard, "You don't understand. That land isn't for profit, it's for hope. And hope isn't for sale." Mr. Anderson smirked, clearly used to getting his way. "Think about it," he said, as he handed over his business card and left. The days that followed were tense. Rumors spread that the company might try legal routes to pressure Keanu into selling. Some townspeople, lured by promises of jobs and wealth, even began taking sides. It wasn't just about a cabin anymore. It was about a battle between heart and money. Keanu didn't back down. He poured more of his own savings into the project, quietly hiring a legal team to protect the land. Emma watched all of this, her little mind struggling to understand why someone would want to destroy a place meant for healing. She asked Keanu one night, "Are you scared?" He smiled, ruffled her hair and said, "Real warriors aren't fearless, Emma. They're just brave enough to stand even when they're scared." And just when we thought the fight couldn't get harder, something incredible happened. Letters started pouring in again. This time not just from kids, but from doctors, nurses, teachers, parents, soldiers, firefighters, people who believed in what Keanu and Emma were building. They offered donations, signatures, even volunteer work. It was as if Emma's courage had sparked a wildfire of kindness no corporation could control. Keanu looked at the growing pile of letters one evening and said to me, "This isn't my battle anymore, it's theirs, and it's hers." News about the battle for the retreat started spreading beyond our small town. A local journalist who had heard about Emma's story and Keanu's fight visited the hospital to interview them. At first, Keanu was hesitant. He didn't want the project to turn into some charity headline, but Emma surprised everyone. She insisted on speaking. With a small microphone clipped to her hospital gown, Emma sat upright, her teddy bear in her lap, and looked straight into the camera. "This place isn't just land," she said softly but firmly. "It's a place where broken kids can become warriors again. If you take it away, where will they go?" Her voice shook at first, but with each word it grew stronger. "You can build hotels anywhere, but you can't rebuild hope once it's torn down." The news segment aired that night and exploded. It wasn't just a local story anymore. National channels picked it up. Social media flooded with Uyghur Warrior Hill and Uyghur Stand with Emma hashtags. Celebrities shared it. Firefighters, nurses, veterans, survivors. People who knew what it felt like to lose and fight for something bigger than themselves. Donations tripled overnight. Volunteers began arriving to help clear trails, plant gardens, build cabins. Some even traveled across states just to hammer a nail or carry stones. I watched Keanu walk among them, quietly working side by side with strangers who had become family. No cameras, No press conferences, just genuine humanity. But not everyone was happy. The corporation's lawyers sent a formal notice, threatening to seize the land if certain development codes weren't met. It was a dirty move, technicalities designed to crush dreams. For a moment, Keanu looked genuinely tired. I saw him late one night sitting alone by the hospital garden, head bowed. Emma wheeled herself quietly beside him. She didn't say anything, for a long time. Then she placed her tiny hand on his and whispered, "You didn't give up on me. I won't let you give up on this." Tears welled up in Keanu's eyes, but he smiled. "All right, little warrior. We fight together." The next day, Keanu made a bold decision. He called a public town meeting. Hundreds showed up, some angry, some curious, most hopeful. Standing before them, holding Emma's hand, Keanu made a pledge. "I promise you, no matter what they throw at us, this hill stays sacred. Not for profit, not for fame, but for every child who needs to remember they are stronger than their scars." The room fell silent. Then someone started clapping, then another. Soon the hall thundered with applause, cheers, and even tears. In that moment, it wasn't just Keanu's fight anymore. It was everyone's. The corporation had money and power. But now Keanu and Emma had something stronger, a united army of hearts. Days turned into weeks, and the pressure only grew stronger. The corporation filed official papers, demanding an emergency hearing to halt all construction. If the judge sided with them, Warrior Hill would be lost before it ever opened. The hearing was set for Friday morning, and as that day approached, a heavy silence fell over everyone who believed in Emma's dream. We spent the night before the hearing gathered at the half-built cabin. Volunteers had strung lights between the trees. Kids who had once been too shy to speak stood up and shared how much Warrior Hill meant to them. Veterans with scars on their faces and nurses with weary eyes told stories of loss, healing, and hope. Emma sat bundled in a blanket, her cheeks glowing, her eyes brighter than ever. Keanu stood beside her, a quiet pillar of strength. He didn't make any speeches that night. He didn't have to. His presence said it all. We are not backing down. The next morning, the courtroom was packed. Reporters lined the hallways. Inside, Keanu wore a simple suit. No fancy lawyers or celebrity agents by his side. Just him, Emma, and a small team of volunteers. Across from us, the corporation's team looked polished and smug, armed with stacks of paperwork and arguments about economic growth and public benefit. When it was Keanu's turn to speak, he didn't read from notes. He stepped forward, looked the judge straight in the eyes, and told the story of Emma, the girl who climbed a mountain after her world burned down. He talked about every letter, every child, every moment that built Warrior Hill not with money but with spirit. Then something unexpected happened. The judge asked, "Is Emma here?" The room turned as Emma, small but fierce, rolled herself forward in her wheelchair. Her voice shook as she spoke, but every word was clear. "This hill isn't about fancy vacations. It's about giving kids like me a reason to dream again." She lifted the drawing she had made, the one that read, "Welcome, warriors. You are home now." The courtroom was dead silent. You could hear people sniffling, holding back tears. The corporation's lawyer tried to object, but the judge held up his hand to stop him. He looked down at Emma's picture for a long, heavy moment. Finally, he spoke. "Some things are worth more than profit." Then he ruled in favor of Keanu and Warrior Hill. Cheers broke out in the courtroom. Reporters scrambled to capture the moment. Volunteers hugged each other. Emma wept openly, clutching her teddy bear. Keanu knelt beside her and whispered something none of us could hear. Later, Emma told me he said, "You saved the hill, not me." As we left the courthouse, people lined the streets clapping and cheering. It was more than just a victory over a corporation. It was proof that kindness, courage, and community still mattered. That evening, Keanu hosted a quiet celebration at the hill. No red carpets, no fancy speeches, just bonfires, laughter, and the kind of peace you can't buy. And as the stars filled the sky, Emma stood for the first time without support, took a step forward, and raised her arms high in the air. Warrior Hill wasn't just built, it was alive. Weeks passed, and Warrior Hill grew into something beyond, even Keanu's dreams. The cabins were finished. Trails wound beautifully through the woods. A treehouse stood tall near the highest oak, a place for kids to dream bigger than their fears. Every weekend, children arrived with their families, burn survivors, cancer fighters, kids with scars on their bodies and bravery in their hearts. Emma became the unofficial guide of Warrior Hill, rolling proudly across the grounds, showing newcomers the secret spots she loved the most. Keanu, always in the background, made sure everything stayed perfect. No cameras, no press, just heart. One late afternoon, as the sun dipped low behind the hills, Keanu called everyone to gather. Near the biggest cabin, Emma sat beside him, her bear still clutched tightly, though now it wore a little handmade warrior badge. Keanu's voice was calm, but there was a weight to his words. "There's something you all should know," he began. "Warrior Hill isn't mine anymore." Gasps rippled through the crowd. He smiled gently. "It belongs to all of you, to every child who ever fought harder than anyone ever saw, to every parent who stayed up at night praying, to every soul who dared to hope again." Then he pulled out a thick folder, the legal papers transferring full ownership of Warrior Hill to a non-profit trust run by the volunteers and families who helped build it. No strings attached, no publicity stunts. He was giving it away. Emma's eyes widened. "But why?" she asked, her voice small. Keanu knelt beside her and said, "Because real heroes know when to build something, and when to step back and let it fly." Tears ran freely down faces around the campfire. Volunteers hugged, children clapped and cheered, and just when we thought the night couldn't get more magical, Keanu surprised everyone again. He pulled out a large, heavy box from his truck. Inside were hundreds of little lanterns, delicate, glowing, floating lights. Everyone got one. "Tonight," he said, "we light the sky, not for what we lost, but for what we found." One by one, we released the lanterns into the night sky. They rose slowly at first, then faster, carried by the warm winds above Warrior Hill. The sky became a river of stars, dancing and swirling, carrying our wishes, our pain, our dreams far beyond what we could see. Emma stood up, leaning on a walker, for the first time in public. With all her strength, she lifted her lantern and whispered, "Thank you." Not just to Keanu, but to life itself, for giving her a second chance. As her lantern floated upward, Keanu looked at her with pride deeper than words could express. The world had seen him as a celebrity. Here, among these warriors, he was just another soldier of hope. Months passed, but the magic of that night never faded. Warrior Hill became a sacred place, a living testament to courage, kindness, and second chances. Families from all corners of the country visited, finding peace where once there was only pain. Emma's story spread quietly, never as a viral trend, but as a whisper between hearts that needed hope. She grew stronger every day, her laugh echoing through the trees, her steps getting steadier. Every time a new child arrived, scared and unsure, Emma would be the first to welcome them, rolling up proudly and saying, "You're a warrior now." Keanu visited often but never stayed long. He would arrive with a backpack, help build a new swing or fix a broken railing, share a quiet meal, then slip away before morning. He didn't crave applause. He only cared that the dream stayed alive. One evening near the anniversary of Warrior Hill's opening, something beautiful happened. As the sun set, a gathering was held, a celebration of every soul who made the impossible possible. Volunteers, families, kids all stood together on the same hill that almost vanished into corporate greed. Keanu stood at the back, arms crossed, a soft smile on his face. Emma spotted him and called out, "Come here, you started this." Laughing, he made his way forward, and the crowd parted for him like he was a light they couldn't help but move toward. A small girl, maybe 6 years old with scars peeking from her sleeves, handed him a hand-painted stone that read, "Hope lives here because of you." Keanu knelt down, hugged the little girl, and placed the stone carefully at the foot of the biggest oak tree, the very first tree that Emma had picked to protect. Then, under the glowing stars, Keanu Reeves, the man the world knew as a movie hero, was honored for being something far greater. A real-life hero. No cameras, no awards. Just grateful, hearts surrounding him in pure, raw respect. As the ceremony ended, Keanu gave a small speech. His voice was steady, full of emotion but never heavy. You don't have to be famous to make a difference, you just have to be kind. To fight for someone who can't fight for themselves. To believe, even when believing is the hardest thing. His words hung in the cool night air, sinking deep into every soul. Before leaving, he hugged Emma one last time and whispered, "Keep being braver than the world expects." Then quietly, he disappeared into the night, leaving behind a hill filled with warriors and a legacy that would outshine any blockbuster. For the respect of Keanu Reeves, please subscribe to the channel. Press the bell icon so you never miss new inspiring stories like this. Thanks.